My name is Charles. I've been called many things in my life: father, friend, neighbor, volunteer at the local shelter. But for most of my adult years, I was simply her husband. That was the role I wore most proudly until it became a weight that dragged me down. Before I go on, I want to ask something of you. Where are you listening from today? I love picturing the towns, the kitchens, the cozy chairs where people like you sit and hear my story. It makes me feel less alone in all this. When I first married her, I thought I had won the lottery. She was charming, ambitious, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people turn their heads. I was quieter, steady, always the one to remember birthdays and to make sure the bills got paid. It seemed like a balance, her fire, my calm. For years, we built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But time reveals things that youthful hope covers up. She loved admiration more than she loved intimacy. While I found joy in the little rituals, planting tulips in spring, hosting dinners, traveling to see our grandchildren, she thrived on being noticed, praised, admired by others. When we were young, it didn't matter as much. But as we grew older, I began to feel her pulling away, as though my aging face no longer fed her ego. The first real sting came in an offhand comment at a family dinner. I had just been talking about a trip I'd always dreamed of. Italy, the canals of Venice, the vineyards of Tuscany, the art in Florence. I could almost taste the olive oil and wine, and I wanted her there beside me. She leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said loud enough for the table to hear, "Italy is not for the old. Besides, you just slow me down." The laughter around the table was polite, but my heart cracked a little. I brushed it off with a smile. But that night, I cried quietly in the bathroom so no one would see. I told myself she was just teasing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a joke. It was how she saw me now. Slower, less exciting, someone whose world should shrink to the size of our living room. After that, comments like that became more frequent. "You don't need to buy that suit. Who are you trying to impress? Why don't you just let the younger folks handle that? Travel is for people with energy, not bad knees." I didn't argue. I had grown used to smoothing things over, to making peace rather than making noise. Still, there were moments when her behavior raised my suspicions. She had a personal trainer, a man maybe half my age, who seemed to orbit around her with constant energy. I noticed how she lit up in his presence in ways she no longer did with me. The way her phone seemed glued to her hand, the texts she brushed off as work. But I wanted to believe the best. After all, hadn't we been through so much together? Children, mortgages, illnesses, family crises. Surely that meant something. But the gap between us grew wider. She'd stay later at the gym or come home restless, critical, impatient. I began to feel invisible. I was there cooking meals, keeping the home, holding the threads of our life together. And yet, it was as though I had faded into wallpaper. And yet, despite all this, a part of me kept dreaming of that trip. I'd sit with travel magazines, run my fingers over photos of ancient ruins and blue coastlines, whispering to myself, one day. I thought maybe if I could get her there, if we could just go, we might find each other again. That dream would soon become the turning point of my life. Not because she agreed to go with me, but because of how cruelly she refused. That refusal, I later realized, was the spark that lit everything else on fire. By then, I didn't yet know about Italy. I didn't yet know the full truth about her and that trainer. But the ground beneath our marriage was already shaking, and I was standing on it with my eyes closed, pretending I didn't feel the tremors. The day I learned the truth about Italy, the world seemed to tilt. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a few words overheard, almost carelessly dropped, but it was enough to unravel years of denial. It was a Tuesday, the sort of day when nothing remarkable is supposed to happen. I was tidying the kitchen, folding laundry, doing the thousand small things that keep a household running. She walked in with that brisk step she used when she wanted to appear busy and important. She barely looked at me, muttering about schedules and deadlines. Then she said it. "I'll be out of town for 2 weeks. Italy. Meetings. Don't wait up. Italy." The word hit me like a blow. My Italy. The one dream I had clung to, the place I had begged her to visit with me. She said it like it was nothing, like it was as ordinary as a trip to the grocery store. I tried to steady my voice. "Italy? Since when are you going to Italy?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Work. You wouldn't enjoy it. Too much walking. Too much noise. You get tired." I stood there, dish towel in my hand, staring at her. Her words didn't sting like a tease anymore. They cut like a knife. She didn't even attempt kindness. It wasn't about protecting me or sparing me. It was about removing me from a picture. For the first time, I didn't swallow my feelings. "You always told me travel wasn't practical. You said we couldn't afford it, that it was frivolous. Now suddenly it's work?" She gave me that look, the one that said the conversation was already over. "I don't need to explain everything to you. I have responsibilities." Responsibilities. That word rattled around in my mind for hours. Later that evening, when she stepped out to take a call, I overheard the soft, too friendly tone in her voice. Not the clipped way she usually spoke to colleagues, but smooth, light, playful. She said his name, her trainer's. I sank into the chair, cold spreading through me. There was laid bare. She wasn't just going on a business trip. She was going with him. And not only had she denied me the dream I had held on to for decades, but she had stolen it for herself with someone else. That night, I didn't cry. Oddly enough, tears didn't come. Instead, a stillness settled over me like a pond when the wind suddenly stops. Anger was there, yes, but beneath it was something even stronger. Clarity. In the days that followed, I watched her with new eyes. The careful grooming before work, the sudden obsession with her appearance, the way she scrolled through her phone late at night with a faint smile. I realized I had been living with a stranger for longer than I cared to admit. Still, a part of me wanted to scream, to accuse, to demand explanations. But what good would that do? She had already made her choice. I could see it in her body, hear it in her tone. Her mind was already in Italy, in cobblestone streets with him by her side. One evening, my neighbor, an old friend who had seen more than I thought, caught me on the porch. "You look tired," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" For once I didn't plaster on the usual smile. I just shook my head, and she, bless her heart, reached out and squeezed my hand. "Don't let her make you small. You got more strength than you know." Her words stuck with me. Maybe it was because she'd known me before the marriage, before the years of shrinking myself to fit into her world. Maybe it was because she said it without pity, just fact, plain and simple. That night, while she was asleep, I sat in the quiet of the living room. I stared at the travel magazines I'd kept tucked away, the ones filled with dog-eared pages and dreams deferred. For years I had begged her to see me, to share my hopes. And here she was, about to live them out with another man. The betrayal burned, but underneath it, something began to stir. It wasn't just rage at her. It was a fire for myself, a whisper that said, "You are not powerless. You're not done." I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When she returned from Italy, she would not be coming home to the same man she left behind. Once the shock of betrayal settled, I discovered something surprising. Beneath the anger, beneath the humiliation, there was a strange calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing after her, trying to please her, waiting for crumbs of affection. No, my mind was clear, my focus sharp. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a pen and a pad of paper, almost like a student again. I made a list, not of groceries, not of chores, but of leverage. Everything we owned, everything we had built together, and more importantly, everything she valued. It wasn't a long list, but it was powerful. Her car, our joint accounts, the house deed, the pension we both contributed to. For decades, I had treated those things as ours. Now, I looked at them as rightfully mine. I had poured my life into this marriage, my energy, my health, my youth. I raised the children, managed the home, supported her career. I had invested everything, and now, finally, I was ready to withdraw. The first target was her car. Oh, that car. It wasn't just metal and wheels to her. It was her pride, her proof that she was still young and desirable. A sleek, polished machine, she babied more than she ever babied me. She waxed it on weekends, bragged about it to friends, insisted it was an investment. I decided that would be the first thing to go. I called a dealer I trusted. He came by 2 days later, looked the car over, and named a fair price. I didn't haggle. I just handed over the keys, signed the papers, and watched as he drove it away. For a moment, I thought my knees would buckle. But then, as the tail lights disappeared, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. It was as if chains had fallen off my wrists. Next came the accounts. I visited the bank in a simple jacket, carrying my bag like any other errand. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, recognized my name on the joint account. "Would you like to make a withdrawal?" she asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "All of it." She blinked, surprised. "All of it. All of it." I repeated, my voice steady. When I walked out of that bank, a cashier's check tucked safely in my bag, I felt taller. She had always assumed I wouldn't touch the money, that I was too timid, too dependent. But every dollar in that account was as much mine as hers, and I wasn't about to leave it sitting there waiting for her and her trainer to sip champagne with. The final step was the lawyer. I made the appointment quietly, slipping out one morning while she thought I was at the grocery store. The lawyer was a seasoned woman, perhaps a few years younger than me, with sharp eyes and a reassuring voice. I laid it all out. The years of belittlement, the trip to Italy, the trainer, the accounts, the car. She didn't flinch. She nodded and said, "You've already done the hardest part, deciding you're done. The rest is just paperwork." Hearing that was like a balm. For so long, I had felt trapped, as though the marriage was an unmovable wall. But now, piece by piece, I was dismantling it. I filed the papers that day. Divorce, a word I had once feared. Now it tasted like liberation. Back at home, I carried on as if nothing had changed. Cooked, cleaned. I smiled politely when neighbors waved. But inside I was a storm. Every action I took was deliberate. Every step laying the groundwork for the moment she returned. I imagined the scene often. Her walking through the door, expecting me to be waiting, docile and forgiving. Instead, she'd find her car gone, her accounts emptied, her husband no longer at her side, but standing tall with divorce papers in hand. The image carried me through those days. Oddly, I wasn't consumed by bitterness. Oh, don't mistake me. I was angry, but the anger wasn't a wildfire anymore. It was a steady flame, controlled, purposeful. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for her. Each night, as I lay in bed alone, I whispered to myself, "She thinks she's in control. Let her. When she comes back, she'll see." And so while she strolled through piazzas and dined on fine wine with her trainer, I was here quietly rewriting the ending of our story. She believed I would be waiting, older and smaller, grateful for whatever scraps she brought back. Instead, I was preparing to stand taller than I ever had in my life. The betrayal had given me something unexpected. Permission. Permission to finally stop living in her shadow and claim the life that was always mine to begin with. While she was off chasing sunsets in Rome and whispering to her trainer under Tuscan skies, I lived a very different Italy right here at home. Mine didn't come with gondolas or piazzas, but it tasted just as sweet because it was my own. The first morning after she left, I brewed a pot of coffee just for myself. No scrambling to make her eggs, just so. No rushing to iron her shirts before work. I sat by the window with my steaming mug and let the silence wash over me. Funny thing, what used to feel lonely now felt peaceful. I could hear birdsong instead of criticism, the hum of the fridge instead of her sighs. I started to reclaim my days, small steps at first. I joined a woodworking class at the community center. For years, I had told myself I was too busy or too old to start something new. But when I picked up that chisel and felt the grain of the wood beneath my hands, I felt 10 years younger. The teacher, a cheerful woman with sawdust on her apron, looked at my first attempt and said, "You've got a real feel for this." No one had complimented me like that in a long time. Not about appearance, not about usefulness, but about me, my talent. Another afternoon, I went on a day trip with a few friends to a little coastal town a couple of hours away. We wandered the boardwalk, ate fried clams, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. For the first time in years, I wasn't glancing at the clock, worrying about being home before she noticed my absence. Freedom, I discovered, didn't need a passport. I also began tending the garden with new energy. That small patch of earth behind our house became my Tuscany. I planted tomatoes, basil, and lavender, digging into the soil with bare hands. I imagined myself in Italy, walking through vineyards, and realized I could create beauty right here. Every green sprout that pushed through the dirt felt like a personal victory. Proof that growth is always possible, no matter the season of life. Meanwhile, she called a few times from overseas. The first time her tone was rushed, distracted. "Everything fine back home?" she asked, as though I were just a caretaker for the house, not her partner of decades. I answered simply, "Everything is fine," leaving out the details of cars sold and accounts emptied. She didn't notice the edge of my voice. She was too busy describing how busy she was with meetings. On another call, I heard his laughter in the background. She tried to cover the phone, but it was too late. My heart didn't break this time. It hardened. If she was flaunting his presence so openly, then she truly believed I was blind, naive, too weak to do anything but wait. The irony was almost funny. She thought I was powerless while I was already building a new life without her. One evening, I went to the lawyer's office again to finalize some documents. Walking into that office felt like stepping into my future. I wasn't just reacting to her betrayal anymore. I was actively shaping what came next. Divorce papers signed, financial matters underway. Each signature was like a declaration. I am not invisible. I also reconnected with my brother, whom I hadn't visited in years because she always complained he talked too much. We sat on his porch drinking beer, and for hours I poured out everything I'd held inside. He listened. He hugged me, and then he laughed softly. "You've got more fight in you than she ever gave you credit for," he said. That became a theme, really. Rediscovering the fight, the spark, the man I used to be before I bent myself into the shape she wanted. I realized how many dreams I had quietly shelved, books I wanted to read, places nearby I had never explored, friendships I had let go of. While she posed in front of fountains with her trainer, I was learning to stand in front of mirrors again, looking at myself not with criticism but with compassion. Wrinkles, silver hair, all of it. I earned them. They told a story of survival, of years lived, of strength. I was not too old for anything. If anything, I was finally the right age to stop caring about her judgments and start living on my own terms. The days passed quickly, and with each one, I grew lighter. The betrayal still burned, yes, but it also gave me a strange gift. Space. Space to remember who I was, space to breathe, space to imagine. I thought often of her return. I pictured her walking into the house, smug from her little adventure, expecting me to be waiting with arms open. The idea made me smile, not because I longed for confrontation, but because I knew the surprise waiting for her would be sweeter than any Italian wine. And so, while she traveled Italy with another man, I traveled back to myself. My journey was quieter, but it was far more meaningful. Because Italy without me wasn't the tragedy she thought it was. Italy without me was the beginning of my freedom. The day of her return felt like the final act of a long play. I had rehearsed the scene in my head so many times that when it finally came, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I heard the taxi pull up outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. My heart didn't race the way it once did when she came home from business trips. No flutter of excitement, no eager anticipation, just a calm certainty, like a storm finally breaking. The front door swung open, and in she came, suitcase in hand, tanned from Mediterranean sun, smelling faintly of perfume I didn't recognize. She had that swagger about her, the look of a woman who thought she was returning to a life neatly waiting for her, preserved just as she left it. "Well," she said, dropping her bags in the hallway. "Home sweet home." I studied her quietly. The smile on her face, the arrogance in her voice. It was almost laughable. She thought she had pulled off the perfect lie, the perfect escape. But her eyes faltered when she glanced out the window and noticed the driveway. Empty. Where's the car? She asked, her voice sharp. Sold, I said, calm as stone. She blinked. You what? I sold it. I repeated, folding my hands on the table. It's gone. Her face reddened. That car was worth. It was worth exactly what I got for it. I interrupted, my voice steady. And that money is mine now. Just like the accounts, just like my time, my energy, my future. She froze, stunned. It took a moment for the weight of my words to land. Her voice dropped, low and dangerous. The accounts? All of them, I said. Every last dollar withdrawn, transferred. You won't be buying champagne in Rome with that money anymore. The look on her face was almost comical, half fury, half disbelief. For years, she had assumed I was harmless, too meek to ever stand up to her. She had built her entire life on that assumption. Now, in one breath, I had shattered it. She slammed her suitcase shut and straightened up, trying to reclaim control. You can't do this. I won't allow it. That was the moment I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but a genuine, liberating one. You won't allow it? That's the problem right there. You've spent decades thinking I needed your permission, but I don't. Not anymore. The papers are filed. The lawyers are handling it. You don't get to allow or forbid anything in my life again. She staggered back as though the words themselves had weight. For a long time, she just stared at me, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then came the rage. You ungrateful, bitter. Stop, I said firmly, raising a hand. My voice didn't shake. For years, I swallowed your insults, your dismissive remarks, your endless belittling. I let you shrink me down until I barely recognized myself. But I'm done. I'm not too old. I'm not too weak. I'm not too small. I am done. Silence fell. For the first time in our marriage, I had the last word, and she knew it. She tried to muster defiance, muttering about lawyers, about how she'd fight me, about how I'd regret this, but there was no fire in it. Her bluff had been called, and she had no cards left. Finally, she grabbed her suitcase and stormed toward the door. You'll be nothing without me, she spat. I stood tall, my hands steady at my sides. On the contrary, I said softly, without you, I am finally something. The door slammed behind her, and just like that, the weight lifted. For the first time in decades, my house wasn't filled with her presence, her criticisms, her demands. It was filled with quiet, and that quiet was mine. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the very spot where I had once cried over her cruel jokes about my age. Now the tears didn't come, only peace. The reckoning was over. She had expected a husband who would wait, who would forgive, who would crumble. Instead, she came home to find a man she never truly knew, a man who had finally remembered his own strength. And though she walked out that door furious, defeated, lost, I knew I had won something far greater than money or revenge. I had won myself back. After she walked out that door, suitcase in hand, I half expected the old ache to return. The fear of being alone, the sting of rejection, the endless questions of what now. But instead, I found something else waiting in the quiet. Relief. For the first time in decades, my house belonged to me. No heavy footsteps pacing the halls. No sharp sighs at dinner. No judgment lurking in the air. Just space. Glorious open space. I filled it with the things I had once tucked away. Music I loved. Photographs of family she never wanted displayed. Even the scent of cedar candles she claimed gave her headaches. Each small choice was an act of reclamation. I didn't leap into wild adventures right away. No, my rebirth was gentler, steadier, like spring unfolding after a hard winter. I woke each morning with purpose. Some days I tended my garden, watching my basil and tomatoes thrive, as though they too knew the house was lighter now. Other days I worked in my woodworking shop, not for praise, not for anyone's approval, but because the feel of wood taking shape beneath my hands made me feel alive. One particularly bright afternoon, I booked a small trip of my own. Not to Italy, not yet, but to a quiet bed and breakfast by the mountains. The woman who ran it welcomed me with warmth, and I spent my days walking trails, breathing in pine air, and writing in a journal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every step I took reminded me that the world hadn't closed its doors to me, no matter what she once said about being too old. I also began reconnecting with people I had lost along the way. Old friends who had grown tired of her arrogance welcomed me back with open arms. We had dinners that stretched into evenings, laughing over memories, creating new ones. My brother visited more often, filling the house with chatter and comfort. Even neighbors seemed to notice the shift in me. "You look different," one said kindly. "Happier." And I was. Not because revenge had satisfied me, though I admit it felt good to see her smugness crumble. My happiness came from something deeper, from realizing that I had survived. More than survived. I had grown. Of course, there were moments of loneliness. Nights when I missed the sound of another voice in the house. Mornings when I longed for companionship. But even those moments were lighter than the constant weight of living with someone who made me feel small. Solitude, I learned, is not the same as emptiness. Sometimes solitude is freedom. I did hear about her now and then, whispers from mutual acquaintances, bits of gossip. Her trainer didn't stick around long once she realized her charm was just a thin veneer for control. She lost more than money in the divorce. She lost her image, her standing. I didn't gloat when I heard these things. I didn't need to. Life has a way of catching up to people like her. What mattered was not her downfall, but my rise. I had found my footing again. I had proven to myself, and maybe to every person listening now, that it's never too late to take back your power. One evening, sitting on my porch as the sun dipped low, I thought of Italy again. Not with bitterness, not with longing, but with a quiet smile. I realized I didn't need Italy to prove anything. If I wanted to go one day, I would. But even if I never set foot in Venice or Tuscany, I had already found something more important, myself. And to you listening right now, wherever you are, maybe in your living room, maybe in your kitchen, maybe alone in your car, I want to say this. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old to live, to dream, to begin again. Age isn't a cage. It's a key if you choose to use it. I had spent too many years letting someone else define my worth. But when she walked away, I finally remembered something I should have known all along. I was never too old. I was timeless. So here I am telling you my story, not as a victim, not as a bitter ex-husband, but as a man reborn. My wife went to Italy with her trainer. I stayed home, sold her car, emptied our accounts, and filed for divorce. When she returned, she found nothing waiting for her. Not her car, not her money, not her obedient husband. And though she thought Italy would be her triumph, it turned out to be mine. Because Italy without me was just a trip. But Italy without her was the beginning of my freedom. Now, before I end, I'll ask again, where are you listening from? I like to imagine this story traveling farther than she ever did, reaching more people than her charm ever could, and maybe, just maybe, inspiring someone to realize that it's never too late. Never too late to stand up, to step out, to start over. I'm Charles. I was her husband for 34 years. But now, I'm simply myself. And that is more than enough.